I've been hiking and backpacking for well over a decade, and during that time, I've learned about the gear and skills I need to keep me safe, comfortable, and efficient in the backcountry. Over the years, I've refined my kit, and today I wanted to share the gear that I'm currently using when I go on one of my backpacking trips. I've added a link in the description of this video to my gear list on lighterpack.com. I hope the information that I'm sharing helps you with deciding what gear is best for you. So with that, let's get into what gear I take backpacking. I need a backpack that can carry load comfortably. The backpack I use on most trips is the Durston Gear Aqua 40. This is a 40-liter pack with an internal frame that weighs under 2 pounds. I keep reaching for this pack as I just find it to be the most comfortable. I attribute this to the design of the suspension system. The suspension system of a pack is what connects you to the load. For this pack, it includes the U-shaped tubular frame, back panel, load lifters, shoulder strap harness, and hip belt. All of these components work well together to carry load. The design of this pack is simple yet very functional. I like packs with a single main compartment, 2 side pockets, a center pocket, and hip belt pockets. It also has stretch mesh pockets on the shoulder straps, making items stored there very accessible. These pockets are a good place to carry a phone, sunglasses, or bear spray. Similar to my ULA pack, this pack has a reverse pull on the hip belt straps. I find this design conforms to my hips better and minimizes pressure points. I can adequately tension the hip belt to limit slipping of the pack on my hips. If a pack slips down, it moves more of the load to the shoulders, which of course is uncomfortable with heavier weight. The pack has load lifters that help dial in the fit of the pack as load is increased. While the pack is not waterproof, the Ultra 200 fabric is water resistant, so it's not going to absorb much water weight. Ultra 200 is also known to be very durable. The roll top closure, top strap, and side compression cord allow me to compress the pack to better fit the load that I'm carrying. I should mention that the bare canister I use does not fit inside the Aqua 40. If I were to use my bare canister with this pack, I would carry the empty canister on top of my Aqua 40. My bare canister does, however, fit inside the larger Aqua 55. Overall, this pack allows me to carry load comfortably and is highly functional. I mentioned earlier that my backpack is not waterproof. Water can and has entered through the seams. To make sure the gear inside my pack stays dry, I line my pack with a clear Nylapro bag from Z-Packs. This liner is the first thing that goes into the main pocket of the pack, and then my gear goes inside the liner. This keeps my gear dry and protected from the outside elements. The 41-inch length of the liner is tall enough to fit the height of my backpack, the material is durable, and I've used the same liner on many trips. If I were to get a hole in the liner, it's easy enough to patch it on trail with some tape. This liner is a dual-purpose item. I also use the liner as an inflation bag to inflate my sleeping pad. It inflates my mattress quickly since it has such a large volume. It takes a little practice, but once you get the hang of it, it works great. I've switched to using the Black Diamond Distance Carbon FLZ trekking poles. These poles are very light at 12 ounces for the pair and swing much easier than my previous pair. Even though they're light, they still feel robust and I haven't had any durability issues so far. I much prefer hiking with trekking poles than without trekking poles. To me, I just feel more stable hiking with trekking poles. They really help when you're trekking across slippery surfaces like water crossings or snow travel, where having 4 points of contact is much more stable than having just 2. My trekking poles are another dual-use item. I also use them to support my shelter. These work well with my shelter since the length is adjustable. This last year I've made the switch to using the Durston Gear X-Mid Pro 1. The X-Mid Pro is a Dyneema composite fabric, single wall, trekking pole style shelter. The weight of this solo shelter with a stuff sack is only 17 ounces. This is a mid-style shelter that uses 2 offset poles to maximize the interior volume. The only negative with my previous shelter was that it did feel a bit cramped at times. This shelter has much more interior volume and is 30% lighter than my previous shelter. It achieves this weight savings by utilizing 0.55 ounce DCF for the outer fabric. Also, the single wall design saves weight over a double wall design. This is my first single wall shelter, and I initially was concerned about condensation. So far, I haven't found it to be much of an issue. On the occasions where some condensation formed, it was easy enough to avoid touching those panels since they were far enough away from me. The shelter is quick to set up, however it does take some practice to get a really good pitch. The Durston Gear website has some good instructions on pitching the shelter. You also have some flexibility with regards to how you pitch it. I normally pitch the outer fly a bit higher to increase ventilation and minimize condensation. If I'm expecting a storm, I can pitch the outer lower to the ground to minimize water spray getting inside the shelter. The vestibules are large and I have no problem storing my pack, shoes, and other gear. The Dyneema composite fabric outer and guy lines do a good job of holding tension throughout the night. Also, the DCF fabric doesn't absorb water, so I can easily shake off any water in the morning when I pack up the tent. The whole shelter packs down very small, so it's easy to fit in my pack with all of my other gear. It has some other nice details like magnetic door toggles, dual interior pockets, and cord to secure the trekking pole tips to the floor. I appreciate the attention to detail that went into the design and build of this shelter, and so far I'm really liking this new shelter. Tent stakes that have good holding power are necessary in stormy conditions. To secure my shelter, I use two different stakes. I use both the full-size MSR Groundhog Y stakes and the smaller mini Groundhog stakes. The full-size Groundhog stakes are longer and have more surface area than the mini Groundhog, which creates greater holding power. I use the full-size Groundhogs on each of the four corners. These are the most important guy lines on a mid to stabilize the shelter. The excellent holding power of the Groundhogs allow me to adequately tension the four corner guy lines. These stakes hold so well it's sometimes difficult to get them out of the ground when I pack up in the morning. I stake out the doors with two of the lighter mini Groundhog stakes. These have decent holding power for the weight. The door guy lines do less to stabilize the shelter, so I use the lighter stakes in these two locations. A good night's sleep is important for recovery. Each component of my sleep system works together to achieve this goal. I use an inflatable mattress as I just find them to be more comfortable than a foam pad, and I find that I get a better night's sleep with one. I've been using the regular length Thermarest Uberlight for several years, but switched to the wide version this last year. After using the wide version all last year, I can definitively say that I prefer the wide version. Now, when my arms are by my side, my elbows aren't off the mattress when I'm lying on my back. Even going to the wide version, the mattress is still very light at only 11 ounces. It packs down very small. You can see the pack size in relation to a Nalgene bottle. You do have to be careful with this pad since it's not as thick as other pads. I do, however, make it a point to inspect my camp spot before I set up my tent and remove any sharp objects that would pierce my shelter floor and sleeping pad. I use the Uberlight for just about all of my summer trips, and then during the shoulder season I'll switch out the Uberlight for the X-Light since it has a higher R value to better insulate me from the cold ground. I've been using a quilt for over 10 years, but this last year I've been experimenting with hoodless sleeping bags. So why the switch? Well, while I love the flexibility that a quilt offers, I did have one problem with my previous quilt. I frequently roll around at night, even more so in the backcountry. All of that rolling around would inevitably lead to drafts. This, of course, is less of an issue on warm nights, but on cold nights this becomes a problem and affects the quality of my sleep. I'm currently using a custom-made Nunatak 3D hoodless sleeping bag. It has a 25 Fahrenheit comfort rating and uses 900 fill down for insulation. I prefer down to synthetic insulation because it has a better warmth to weight ratio, and it compresses to a smaller volume inside my pack. It has a zip down the middle so I can drape it over me like a blanket at the start of the evening when it's warmer. Then, when it gets colder, I can zip up the bag and cinch down the draft collar to retain heat. It has a sewn-in closed footbox which minimizes heat loss compared to an open footbox with a cinch cord. There is no setting up straps around an air mattress with a hoodless sleeping bag, so I don't have to fiddle with the straps. My configuration doesn't weigh that much more than a quilt at the same temperature rating, and I don't experience any drafts. I've not given up on a quilt for good, but for now, I'll continue using the hoodless sleeping bag. Pillows are one of the gear items that really come down to personal preference. I've tried a lot of pillows over the years. So far, the one that I've found to be the most comfortable is the Mountain Laurel Designs ClimaShield pillow. Personally, I prefer a softer versus firmer pillow, and this pillow feels like the pillow I sleep on at home. Unfortunately, MLD stopped making these pillows. Hopefully, they'll decide to bring them back. In the meantime, there are a couple of other vendors that sell a pillow using the same ClimaShield synthetic insulation. My sit pad is made from a 20-inch roll of 1/8 inch thick EVA foam cut to a length of 40 inches. I not only use it as a sit pad when I take breaks throughout the day, I also use it as part of my sleep system. I put this sit pad between my sleeping pad and shelter floor. This adds friction and makes it more difficult for my pad to slide around at night. To filter water, I use the HydroPack Flux 1-liter system. Similar to other squeeze bottle filter systems, the cap has an integrated water filter. The flow rate coming out of the nozzle is good, and the overall system is lightweight. The bottles are slim and easily slide into my pack pockets. If I need to carry additional water on a dry section of trail, or when I need extra water at camp, I'll use a 2-liter Evernew collapsible water bottle. I also carry water purification tablets as backup if my filter failed, or in cases where the only available water is suspect. I have two options when it comes to meal preparation in the backcountry. The first option is a kit that uses an upright canister stove, a small 500 milliliter titanium pot, and a folding spoon. The stove I use is the MSR Pocket Rocket Deluxe. This is one of the most fuel-efficient stoves in outdoor conditions where there's almost always some amount of wind. While the stove performs well in the wind with its burner lip design and recessed burner, I try and keep it out of the wind as much as possible, since this wastes fuel by pushing heat away from the bottom of the pot. The push-button igniter is convenient and has been reliable. There are lighter stoves on the market, but to me, this stove is the best combination of weight, power, efficiency, ease of use, and reliability. There are some trips when I want to go as light as possible. For those trips, I'll leave the stove and fuel behind and just cold soak my food. This kit only consists of a Talenti jar and a folding spoon. It's not for everyone, but for overnights or weekend trips, I'll sometimes use this option. We have a responsibility to protect our food in the backcountry. A bear or other animal that gets a food reward begins to associate humans with access to food. This becomes a problem for both humans and bears. Food-conditioned bears will often end up being euthanized, so it's important for bears that we properly protect our food. We never want them to get a food reward. While some popular areas have food protection infrastructure, such as bear lockers or bear wires, most areas do not, and it is left to the individual backpacker to protect their food. I have two food protection options that I use. In areas that don't require a bear canister, I use the combination of an Ursack with an odor-proof bag. Bears have an excellent sense of smell, so it's important to use odor-proof bags along with an Ursack to minimize food odors. I put my food, trash, and toiletries into a NyloPro bag. This then goes into my Ursack to be secured to a tree or other stationary object. Doing this minimizes food odors, which reduces the chance that a bear finds my food overnight. So far, this method has been successful in preventing any animals from getting a food reward. Some national parks and other wilderness areas require the use of a bear canister to store your food. For those trips, I use my Barricade Scout bear canister. It's one of the lightest bear canisters on the market. I can store up to 5 days of food in the Scout model if I'm efficient in the way I pack my food. My food is secure in a canister, and I can easily store my food away from camp. Of all the nights I've stored food in this canister, I've never heard or seen any evidence of an animal attempting to get into my food. I mentioned earlier that my bear canister doesn't fit inside my pack. I carry it empty on the top of my pack. I create a recess in the top of my pack and attach a harness to my bear canister since the canister is completely smooth. This keeps my canister in place on top of my pack. I use a Hyperlite Mountain Gear pod to carry food inside my pack. The pod shape fits the cross-section of my pack better than just leaving the food in my Ursack inside my pack. I pack my empty Ursack folded up inside my pack. I also like this pod because the clamshell zipper design makes it easier to find items compared to a stuff sack with a smaller top opening. The headlamp I use is the Nitecore NU25UL model. It's lightweight at 1.6 ounces, it's rechargeable, and uses a standard USB-C connector. I use it mostly in camp, but it's powerful enough at 400 lumens to light up the trail if I do any hiking after dark. For navigation, I primarily use paper maps, and I'll also use the Gaia GPS app on my phone. Before all of my trips, I create my route in Gaia and then cache the map and route to my phone. Then, when I'm out on trail, I'll put my phone in airplane mode. This saves battery power but still allows me to use the GPS capability. The app with GPS is really useful when you need confirmation of your location. Anyone who's hiked long enough will encounter times when you're not sure if you're still on trail. I've had trips where a section of the trail is snow covered, or the trail is unmaintained and it's difficult to make out where exactly the trail is. This is where having an app with GPS is really useful. I can save a lot of time by launching the app, turning on the GPS to see exactly where I'm at in relation to the trail. I use my phone for non-emergency communication when I have cellular coverage. When I'm on trail, I rarely have cellular coverage, so this is mostly when I'm off trail. I also use a satellite messenger for non-emergency communication. I send a text each evening to let my family and friends know that I'm safe. Of course, the main reason for bringing the satellite messenger is in the event of an emergency. I can hit the SOS button to request help if I'm in a life-threatening situation, which of course can save your life. Last, I use a Nitecore NB10000 power bank to charge my communication and other electronic devices. So let's say it's early summer and all of the snow hasn't completely melted out and there's still some snow in the higher elevations. If the route that I have planned has some snow-covered sections, then I need to consider bringing these devices. Here we have 2 traction devices, microspikes and crampons, and then we also have an ice axe for self-arresting. Now, which of these items I bring will very much depend on the terrain and conditions. For example, if the snow-covered sections aren't steep, then I would consider using the microspikes and my trekking poles to maintain my footing. These microspikes from Black Diamond are light at less than 9 ounces with the stuff sack. They also pack down small enough to fit into one of my hip belt pockets. On the other hand, If the snow-covered sections are steep and potentially icy, I need to be concerned with an uncontrolled slide that could risk serious injury or worse. In this scenario, I would opt for the crampons and ice axe. A first aid kit is an essential item that I take on every hiking and backpacking trip. The items that go into my first aid kit include items that I can use to treat common problems on the trail. These include minor cuts and scrapes, blisters, overuse aches and pains, allergic reactions or stomach issues. In addition to the normal hygiene items, I also bring some items for repair. I won't go into all the items here. Instead, you can refer to my gear list on lighterpack.com to see all the items that are included in my hygiene, first aid, and repair kit. I have a separate video where I go into clothing, layering, and footwear in more detail, but I'll talk about some of the updates I've made since that video. First, I should point out that the clothing I have listed here is for summer. If my trip is in the shoulder season, then I'd add some additional layers and substitute some of the items with heavier pieces, such as a heavier down jacket. So if we assume this is a summer trip in the US Mountain West, I'm looking for clothing that provides bug and sun protection, clothing that breathes well so I don't get too hot, and clothing that dries quickly if it gets wet. For a top, I like a button-down polyester travel shirt. I like these in the summer since they have a weave that's tight enough to prevent bugs from biting me through the shirt. The top that I have listed is light, dries quickly, and has good breathability. For shorts, I like these shorts from Path Projects. They're a lightweight running short that uses a separate underwear. I find this combination more comfortable and more convenient to clean versus a short with a built-in liner. To protect my head from the sun, I hike in a ball cap and then add a lightweight sun cape to protect my neck and face. Also, I'll wear sunglasses to protect my eyes. I also have a separate video where I go into shoes for hiking in more detail. I look for a shoe that's durable, well cushioned, and has an aggressive lug pattern to give me good traction. So now if we take a look at the clothing that I carry, we'll start with the tops. First, I either bring a rain shell or a wind shell. I bring the rain shell on just about every trip, except for trips that are really short in summer when I'm not expecting any rain. For a rain shell, I use the Patagonia Storm Racer rain jacket. This rain jacket is simple and light. It doesn't have any hand pockets to save weight. For a wind shell, I use the Arc'teryx Squamish jacket. Shells offer a lot of versatility. I often hike in it when it's windy or when it gets a little cooler. When I first get into camp, I can put on a shell to protect me from the bugs as well. If the temps are a bit cooler, I'll add an active insulation layer that I can use while hiking. I like the Senchi Alpha 60 hoodie. It's made from an Alpha Direct fabric, which is warm for its very low weight. I don't need this layer on many of my summer trips when it's warm, but it's really nice in the shoulder season. I can hike in some pretty cold temps using the Senchi hoodie underneath a shell. For the passive insulation layer, I'm currently using a new Timmermade SUL .75 down sweater. This down sweater with a hood is only 5 ounces. This simple design prioritizes weight and warmth. It uses larger baffles to maximize warmth. It also removes the front zip and pockets to achieve its light weight. This passive insulation layer is mainly used in the evening or morning in camp when it's cold and I've stopped moving for the day. I can also sleep in this jacket inside my sleeping bag if it were to get really cold at night. Moving away from tops, I'll bring a lightweight hiking pant that I can use when it's cooler. I'll also wear these in camp to protect my legs from the bugs while I'm in camp. I'll bring a bug net unless my trip is outside the bug season. I'll bring a beanie and gloves and a second pair of socks and underwear, and then I bring a separate shirt and bottom that I use for sleeping, and I do this for 2 reasons. If my hiking clothes happen to be wet, then I always have a dry pair of clothes to sleep in. Also, I like to sleep in clean clothes and not my hiking clothes, which can get pretty dirty. Alright, so that concludes with what gear I take on my backpacking trips. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more related content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. you.